My friends, have you ever met someone and thought to yourself, wow, this person just doesn't get it? We've all been there. Sometimes it's a stranger, sometimes a coworker, and sadly, sometimes even someone close to us. The truth is, stupidity isn't just about having a low IQ or not doing well in school. It's about the choices people make, the way they think, and how they react to life. A person can be highly educated and still act foolishly, while someone with little formal education can be incredibly wise. Here's the thing. Recognizing the signs of a stupid person isn't about judging others or feeling superior. It's about protecting your peace, your time, and your energy. Stupid behavior can be toxic, and if you don't recognize it early, you might get dragged into unnecessary drama, conflicts, or even serious mistakes. In today's world, where misinformation spreads like wildfire and egos run wild, it's more important than ever to know the warning signs. These signs are like red flags waving in your face, telling you to stay alert and maybe even keep your distance. So, let's dive deep into the 6 major signs of a stupid person. As you listen, think about the people around you and maybe even yourself, because sometimes we all have a little foolishness to overcome. Understanding these signs can help you grow wiser and avoid the traps of stupidity in everyday life. Sign 1. They refuse to listen and always think they're right. One of the clearest and most dangerous signs of a stupid person is their absolute refusal to listen to anyone else. These people live in a bubble where only their opinions matter and no amount of logic, evidence, or experience can break through. They have this deep-rooted belief that they are always right, even when they are obviously wrong. It's like arguing with a brick wall. You can shout, explain, or even show proof, but they won't budge. Think about this for a moment. Smart people know that the world is complex and no one has all the answers. That's why wise individuals listen carefully, ask questions, and are open to learning from others. On the other hand, a foolish person sees listening as a sign of weakness. They don't want to admit they don't know something because, in their mind, that would make them less than. So instead of growing, they stay stuck, repeating the same mistakes over and over again. Let's picture a real-life example. Imagine you have a coworker named Daniel. Every time the team has a meeting, he dominates the conversation. Whenever someone suggests a new idea, Daniel cuts them off and insists his way is the only way. Even when past projects have failed because of his bad decisions, he blames others instead of admitting his mistakes. Working with someone like Daniel is exhausting, right? That's because stubbornness combined with arrogance creates a toxic environment. This behavior doesn't just show up at work. It happens in families, friendships, and relationships too. Have you ever tried giving advice to someone you care about, only for them to completely ignore you and then later complain about the exact problem you warned them about? It's frustrating because you can see the disaster coming, but they refuse to hear it. At the heart of this issue is ego. Stupid people let their ego control them. They are so focused on being right that they miss opportunities to grow. For them, every conversation becomes a battle to win rather than an exchange of ideas. Even if someone presents undeniable facts, they will twist the situation or change the subject just to avoid admitting they were wrong. Here's why this is so dangerous. Refusing to listen can lead to bad decisions that affect not just the individual, but everyone around them. For example, if a business leader ignores warnings about financial risks, the whole company could suffer. If a parent refuses to listen to their child's feelings, that relationship could be permanently damaged. Stupidity spreads pain because it blocks communication and understanding. Another key problem with people who won't listen is that they don't grow emotionally or intellectually. Think about it. Growth only happens when you take in new information and adjust your behavior. But if you're constantly shutting out other perspectives, you're stuck in the same place forever. It's like trying to water a plant that's sealed inside a jar. Nothing can reach it, so it slowly withers away. The sad part is, many people don't even realize they're doing this. They might say, "I'm just confident," or "I have strong opinions," but in reality, they're displaying stupidity disguised as confidence. True confidence doesn't fear listening. It welcomes different viewpoints because strong people know listening doesn't make them weak. It makes them wiser. So how do you protect yourself from this type of person? First, recognize the pattern. If someone constantly interrupts you, never considers your perspective, or reacts defensively when challenged, that's a red flag. Limit your emotional investment in conversations with them. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is stop trying to convince them and instead focus on your own growth. Second, don't fall into their trap. Stupid people often drag others into endless arguments just to prove their point. They thrive on conflict because it feeds their ego. When you stay calm and refuse to engage in their power struggle, you take away their control. Lastly, reflect on your own behavior. None of us are perfect. We've all been stubborn at some point. The difference is, wise people notice this about themselves and try to change. Ask yourself, am I open to other perspectives? Do I listen more than I speak? Self-awareness is the first step toward wisdom. To sum it up, refusing to listen and always thinking you're right is a hallmark of stupidity. It creates conflict, destroys relationships, and keeps people stuck in the same destructive patterns. By recognizing this behavior in others and guarding against it in ourselves, we can avoid unnecessary pain and build healthier, more understanding connections with the people around us. Sign 2. They act without thinking about the consequences. Another major sign of a stupid person is their habit of acting first and thinking later, or worse, not thinking at all. These are the people who jump into situations blindly, make impulsive decisions, and then act shocked when everything falls apart. They live in the moment without considering how their choices might affect their future, their loved ones, or even themselves. Think about it. Wise people pause before taking action. They ask questions like, what could go wrong? How will this decision affect me tomorrow, next week, or even next year? But a foolish person doesn't bother with these thoughts. They get caught up in emotions like excitement, anger, or greed, and let those feelings drive their actions. It's like trying to drive a car with your eyes closed. You might get lucky for a short while, but eventually, you're going to crash. For example, imagine a person named Sarah. She sees an expensive phone online and immediately buys it with a credit card, even though she doesn't have enough money to pay her bills that month. At first, she feels excited and proud of her new phone. But a few weeks later, she's drowning in debt and stressed out about late fees. Instead of learning her lesson, she repeats the same mistake, buying more things she can't afford. This cycle of poor decisions continues because she never stops to think ahead. This kind of behavior doesn't just happen with money. It shows up in relationships too. Someone might start dating a person they barely know because they feel lonely, ignoring all the red flags. Later, when the relationship turns toxic, they wonder, how did this happen to me? The truth is, it happened because they didn't slow down and consider the consequences of their choices. Acting without thinking is also common in moments of anger. Stupid people often say hurtful things in the heat of the moment, not realizing how deeply their words can wound someone. By the time they calm down and regret what they said, the damage is already done. Wise individuals, on the other hand, understand the power of words. They pause, breathe, and think carefully before responding. One of the most dangerous areas where this sign shows up is in risk-taking behavior. Some people engage in reckless activities, driving dangerously, abusing substances, or breaking the law, without considering the long-term cost. They convince themselves, nothing bad will happen to me, but reality always catches up. These choices can lead to broken relationships, lost opportunities, or even serious harm. Why do foolish people act this way? It often comes down to instant gratification. They want pleasure, excitement, or relief right now and aren't willing to delay their desires for a better outcome later. Psychologists call this impulse control, and it's a skill that wise people develop over time. Stupid people, however, never practice it. They live in a constant cycle of short-term thrills followed by long-term regret. Here's an important truth. Every action has a ripple effect. Like tossing a stone into a pond, your decisions create waves that spread far beyond the initial splash. For example, quitting a job without a plan might seem liberating in the moment, but it could lead to months of financial struggle. Similarly, betraying a friend's trust might feel satisfying in a moment of anger, but it can destroy that relationship forever. If you want to avoid this trap, learn to pause. When faced with a choice, big or small, ask yourself 3 questions. What are the possible outcomes of this decision? How will I feel about this choice a week, a month, or a year from now? Am I making this decision out of emotion or logic? These simple questions can save you from a lot of pain and regret. It's also helpful to seek advice from people you trust. Wise individuals aren't afraid to ask for guidance, while foolish ones assume they know it all. Sometimes a fresh perspective can reveal dangers you didn't see on your own. Let's take a lesson from nature. Think of a river. When it flows calmly, it nourishes everything around it. But when it floods uncontrollably, it destroys homes and lives. Your actions are like that river. If you control your impulses and think carefully, you can create growth and harmony. But if you let your emotions take over, chaos will follow. To sum it up, acting without thinking is a clear sign of stupidity. It leads to unnecessary mistakes, broken relationships, and wasted opportunities. By learning to pause, reflect, and make thoughtful decisions, you not only protect yourself, but also create a more stable and fulfilling life. The smartest people in the world aren't those who never make mistakes. They're the ones who slow down long enough to avoid making the same mistake twice. Sign 3. They constantly blame others and never take responsibility. Another powerful sign of a stupid person is their inability to take responsibility for their actions. Instead of admitting when they're wrong, they shift the blame to someone else. These people treat life like a game where they're always the innocent victim and everyone else is the villain. No matter what happens, They have a long list of excuses ready to protect their fragile ego. Wise people understand that mistakes are part of growth. When they fail, they reflect, learn, and try again with more wisdom. But foolish people? They refuse to look in the mirror. Admitting a mistake feels like admitting weakness to them, so they dodge accountability at all costs. This behavior keeps them stuck in the same destructive patterns because you can't fix a problem you refuse to acknowledge. Let's picture an example. Imagine a young man named Kevin who always shows up late to work. When his boss questions him, Kevin never says, "I'm sorry, I'll do better." Instead, he blames traffic, the weather, his alarm clock, anything but himself. Even when he's given multiple warnings, Kevin insists that his lateness isn't his fault. Eventually, he loses his job, and instead of reflecting, he complains to his friends, "My boss hated me for no reason." The truth? Kevin's lack of responsibility ruined his own career, but he's too blind to see it. This behavior also appears in relationships. Take Samantha, for instance. She constantly argues with her partner, yet every fight is somehow the other person's fault. If she yells, it's because he made her angry. If she forgets an important date, it's because he didn't remind her. Over time, this creates a toxic cycle where the relationship becomes one-sided and filled with resentment. Samantha's refusal to take ownership eventually drives people away. But instead of learning, she simply blames her ex-partners and moves on to repeat the same mistakes with someone new. At its core, this blame-shifting behavior comes from fear and pride. Stupid people fear being seen as imperfect, so they build walls of excuses to protect their image. They also have too much pride to admit they might be wrong. To them, saying, "I made a mistake," feels like surrendering in a battle they must always win. Here's the real danger. When someone never takes responsibility, they never grow. It's like being stuck in a loop, replaying the same problem over and over. For instance, Ryan failed his college exams not because he didn't study, but because the teacher was unfair. The following semester, he blames bad luck. The semester after that, he blames a noisy roommate. Notice the pattern. Ryan never improves because he refuses to face the truth, his own lack of effort. Blaming others also destroys trust. Imagine working on a team project with someone who always points fingers. When something goes wrong, instead of solving the problem, they're busy throwing others under the bus. This creates tension and fear because everyone knows they could be the next target. Over time, people stop wanting to work with them, and they become isolated. Wise people, on the other hand, see responsibility as a strength. When they make a mistake, they own up to it, apologize, and take steps to do better next time. This builds trust and respect. Even in failure, they gain something valuable: the respect of others and the personal growth that comes from learning. Here's a simple truth. Life will always throw challenges your way. Sometimes those challenges are beyond your control. But how you respond to them is always your choice. Stupid people focus on blaming, while wise people focus on improving. So, how do you deal with someone who constantly blames others? First, don't get trapped in their game. They may try to drag you into endless arguments to defend yourself. Stay calm and focus on facts rather than emotions. Second, set clear boundaries. If they refuse to take accountability, protect your own mental health by limiting your involvement with them. And finally, reflect on yourself. Have you ever blamed others when things went wrong? It's natural. We all do it sometimes. The key is to catch yourself and shift your mindset. Instead of asking, "Who can I blame?" try asking, "What can I learn from this?" That small change can transform you from a victim of circumstances into a master of your own destiny. To sum it up, constantly blaming others is a hallmark of stupidity. It destroys relationships, blocks personal growth, and creates endless cycles of failure. By taking responsibility for our actions, we not only earn respect, but also gain the power to shape our future. Wise people understand that accountability isn't a burden. It's the path to freedom and success. Sign 4. They speak more than they think. One of the most visible signs of a foolish person is their habit of talking endlessly without ever pausing to think. Their mouths move faster than their brains, and as a result, they often create misunderstandings, spread wrong information, and hurt others with their careless words. They don't just talk a lot. They talk without purpose or awareness. I once knew a man named Brian who was infamous in his neighborhood for always having an opinion on everything. One evening, during a family dinner, the topic of an upcoming local election came up. Everyone was calmly discussing the candidates, sharing facts and personal experiences. Suddenly, Brian jumped in and started speaking as though he were an expert. He spoke so loudly and passionately that others couldn't get a word in. He made bold claims about policies and even accused one candidate of corruption. Later, when someone gently asked Brian where he got his information, he couldn't provide a single source. It turned out he had heard bits and pieces from random social media posts and had stitched them together into a dramatic story. His words caused tension in the room. Some family members left the table upset, while others argued among themselves. The entire evening was ruined, not because of the election itself, but because Brian had spoken recklessly without thinking. This type of behavior happens everywhere, not just in family gatherings. In one office I worked at, there was a woman named Laura who loved to gossip. One morning, she told several colleagues that Megan, another co-worker, was planning to quit her job and move to another city. She said it with such confidence that everyone believed her. By lunchtime, the entire office was buzzing with the news. When Megan found out, she was shocked and embarrassed. She had no such plans and couldn't understand how the rumor started. The truth? Laura had overheard Megan casually mentioning that she might visit her sister in another city for a few weeks. Instead of clarifying, Laura turned it into a dramatic story and spread it like wildfire. Her careless talking damaged Megan's reputation and created mistrust in the team. This is the danger of people who speak without thinking. They create ripples of chaos wherever they go. Their words can ruin friendships, harm careers, and even destroy families. Sometimes the damage is permanent. I once knew a man named Marcus who got into a heated argument with his best friend. In the heat of anger, Marcus shouted something incredibly cruel, something he didn't truly mean. Though he apologized later, his friend was deeply hurt. Their relationship never fully recovered. That one careless outburst erased years of trust and love. Why do foolish people behave this way? Often it's because of insecurity. They feel that staying silent will make them seem unimportant or unintelligent, so they overcompensate by constantly talking. They crave attention and validation, even if what they're saying is wrong or harmful. Another reason is a lack of self-control. Wise people pause before speaking. They think carefully and ask themselves, is this true? Is this kind? Is this necessary? Foolish people skip this step entirely. This behavior often includes interrupting others. Have you ever tried to share an idea only to be cut off before finishing your sentence? It's infuriating, isn't it? People who constantly interrupt aren't really listening. They're just waiting for their turn to talk, eager to be the center of attention. This habit not only ruins conversations, but also shows a lack of respect and maturity. There's an old saying that goes, "Better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt." When someone talks too much without thinking, they expose their ignorance for everyone to see. Silence, on the other hand, often creates an impression of wisdom and strength. So, how do you deal with someone like this? First, be cautious about what you share with them. If they spread rumors or repeat private information, don't give them ammunition to use against you. Second, don't get dragged into their drama. When they speak recklessly, stay calm and avoid reacting emotionally. And finally, reflect on yourself. We've all spoken carelessly at some point, maybe in excitement or anger. The key is to grow from those moments. Before you speak, take a deep breath and ask yourself 3 questions. Is what I'm about to say true? Will it help or harm someone? Is it really necessary to say it? If the answer to any of these is no, silence might be the wiser choice. In the end, talking without thinking is more than just an annoying habit. It's a sign of deep foolishness. It creates unnecessary conflict and exposes a lack of maturity. Wise people know that words are powerful, and they choose them carefully. By speaking thoughtfully, you can build trust, solve problems, and create harmony, instead of leaving behind a trail of confusion and pain like Brian, Laura, and Marcus. Sign 5. They refuse to learn from their mistakes. Another unmistakable sign of a foolish person is their inability, or outright refusal, to learn from their own mistakes. Everyone makes errors. It's part of being human. But what separates the wise from the foolish is how they respond to those errors. Wise people treat mistakes as lessons. They reflect, analyze, and adjust their behavior so they don't repeat the same errors. Foolish people, however, ignore the lessons life is trying to teach them. They continue walking the same path, repeating the same failures, and wondering why nothing ever changes. Consider someone named James, for example. James repeatedly invested money in get-rich-quick schemes, convinced that this time it would work. The first time he lost a significant amount, but instead of analyzing what went wrong or learning about proper investments, he shrugged it off and tried a similar scheme a few months later. Once again, he lost money. Still, James did not pause to reflect or educate himself on the dangers of hasty investments. By refusing to learn, he trapped himself in a cycle of repeated failure. This pattern isn't limited to finances. It shows up in relationships as well. Take Emily, who had a habit of dating people who treated her poorly. Each relationship ended painfully, but instead of recognizing the warning signs, she rushed into a new relationship with the same type of person, convinced it would be different. Every heartbreak could have been an opportunity for growth, but Emily's refusal to learn from experience kept her trapped in an endless loop of disappointment. Stupid people often lack self-awareness. They don't stop to ask themselves, what went wrong? What could I do differently next time? Instead, they blame external circumstances, other people, or bad luck. This refusal to take responsibility for learning ensures that they continue to make the same mistakes over and over. One of the reasons this behavior is so damaging is that it wastes time, energy, and resources. Life is finite, and every mistake we make is an opportunity to grow. Ignoring that opportunity is essentially throwing away precious chances to improve. Imagine someone continually failing in their career because they refuse to understand why they keep losing clients or missing deadlines. Not only do they suffer personally, but everyone around them, colleagues, clients, and family, feels the impact of their repeated mistakes. A real-world example can be seen in Robert, a man who repeatedly ignored health warnings. He smoked heavily and avoided exercise, despite frequent advice from doctors and friends. Each time he experienced health problems, he treated them as isolated incidents, never changing his habits. Over time, his health deteriorated significantly, but he continued to ignore the lessons that should have prompted change. What drives this refusal to learn? Often, it's a combination of pride and laziness. Stupid people are too proud to admit that they were wrong, and they are too lazy to put in the effort required to understand what went wrong and how to fix it. Their ego tells them, "I don't need to learn from mistakes. I am fine as I am." This mindset blocks growth, leaving them stuck in a cycle of failure and frustration. Another factor is a fear of discomfort. Learning from mistakes requires honesty, introspection, and sometimes making difficult changes. Foolish people avoid this because it's uncomfortable. They'd rather continue in their patterns than face the reality of their errors. This fear also keeps them dependent on others for guidance and prevents them from developing the resilience needed to overcome challenges. In contrast, wise people embrace their mistakes. They see failure as feedback rather than punishment. For instance, a successful entrepreneur might fail multiple times before building a thriving business. Each failure teaches something new, a better strategy, a more efficient process, or improved decision-making. The key difference is reflection and adjustment. Stupid people skip these steps entirely. The consequences of refusing to learn are far-reaching. Careers stall, relationships break, and personal growth becomes stagnant. Imagine an employee who consistently misses deadlines. If they refuse to analyze their workflow, seek advice, or learn better time management, they will keep facing the same issues. Eventually, opportunities pass them by, and others rise while they remain stuck. Even small, everyday mistakes matter. Consider driving, for example. Someone who repeatedly forgets to check their blind spots or drive carefully may avoid accidents for a while purely by chance. But without learning from their mistakes, it's only a matter of time before carelessness leads to serious consequences. This pattern applies to every area of life: finance, health, communication, career, and personal growth. The way to break free from this trap is self-reflection. Ask yourself, what went wrong here? What part did I play in this outcome? What can I do differently next time? This honest evaluation is the cornerstone of growth. It doesn't matter how many mistakes you make. What matters is whether you take the lessons seriously. It's also important to seek feedback. Wise people value constructive criticism because it highlights areas where they can improve. Stupid people reject feedback, viewing it as a personal attack rather than a tool for growth. This refusal ensures that mistakes accumulate, creating a lifetime of repeated failures. Another key point is humility. Accepting that you can be wrong is not a weakness. It's a strength. It opens doors to learning, improvement, and greater success. Foolish people blinded by ego, see humility as defeat and thus remain stuck in their cycles of error. In summary, refusing to learn from mistakes is a hallmark of stupidity. It creates repeated failures, wasted time, and unnecessary suffering. By embracing reflection, seeking feedback, and applying lessons learned, we turn errors into stepping stones toward success. Wise people understand that every mistake carries a lesson, and growth comes from facing those lessons honestly. Foolish people, on the other hand, ignore the wisdom life offers, ensuring that the same mistakes repeat endlessly, often with increasingly serious consequences. Recognizing this sign in others and in yourself is essential. If you notice patterns of repeated errors, ask questions, seek understanding, and take proactive steps to change. Growth begins with awareness, and awareness begins with a willingness to learn. Refusing to learn keeps a person trapped in the past, while embracing lessons propels them forward into a wiser, more successful future. Sign 6. They surround themselves with yes men and avoid real challenges. The final sign of a foolish person is their tendency to surround themselves with people who never challenge them and to avoid situations that require real effort or critical thinking. These individuals crave constant validation, so they choose friends, colleagues, or partners who always agree with them, regardless of how illogical or harmful their ideas may be. By doing this, they create an echo chamber where their opinions seem brilliant, their decisions always justified, and their mistakes invisible. Take Daniel, for instance. He was a small business owner who loved to hear praise. Instead of listening to his employees' feedback about flawed business strategies, he hired people who constantly agreed with him. Whenever a project failed, Daniel didn't see it as a learning opportunity. He saw it as an external problem, blaming luck or market conditions. By insulating himself from honest advice, he never improved his decision-making, and eventually, his business collapsed. This behavior also appears in friendships. A foolish person will choose friends who flatter them rather than challenge their thinking. Rebecca, for example, always sought out companions who praised her choices, whether good or bad. When she made reckless spending decisions, they cheered her on instead of offering guidance. By avoiding constructive criticism, she created a life that looked confident on the surface but was full of poor choices beneath. Avoiding real challenges is another hallmark of stupidity. Foolish people prefer easy wins and avoid tasks that require effort, persistence, or critical thought. They shy away from situations where they could fail or be exposed as unprepared. For example, Michael avoided public speaking opportunities at work because he feared criticism. Instead, he stayed in his comfort zone, missing chances to grow professionally. Wise people, on the other hand, embrace challenges because they see them as opportunities to learn and improve. The danger of surrounding yourself with yes men is profound. When no one dares to point out mistakes, foolish people keep making the same errors, believing their decisions are perfect. This creates a false sense of security that prevents growth and encourages arrogance. Eventually, reality catches up, projects fail, relationships crumble, and opportunities vanish because they never faced honest feedback or learned to handle challenges. Another problem is that avoiding challenges limits personal development. Life is a series of tests, and the hardest challenges often teach the most valuable lessons. A foolish person, by seeking only comfort and agreement, deprives themselves of experiences that could build resilience, wisdom, and confidence. Sophia, for example, avoided taking on a leadership role because she feared making mistakes. Meanwhile, her peers who embraced challenges grew rapidly in skill and confidence, leaving her stagnant in comparison. This behavior also damages relationships. People who only seek flattery are often shallow, self-centered, and uninterested in genuine connection. They treat others as tools to reinforce their self-image rather than as equals with unique perspectives. Over time, friends and colleagues grow frustrated and distance themselves, leaving the foolish person isolated, surrounded only by the limited feedback of their yes men. Why do foolish people do this? At the root, it's fear and insecurity. Facing criticism or failure requires courage and self-awareness. Foolish people avoid this because it threatens their fragile ego. Instead, they create a controlled environment where they are always validated, even if it means ignoring reality and making repeated mistakes. Wise individuals, in contrast, seek out challenges and feedback. They surround themselves with people who offer honest opinions, even if it's uncomfortable. They understand that criticism and difficulty are opportunities for growth, not threats to their ego. By exposing themselves to diverse perspectives and challenging situations, they learn faster, make better decisions, and build resilience. If you want to identify this type of person, watch who they choose as companions and how they respond to difficulty. Do they avoid complex tasks, shy away from criticism, or surround themselves only with yes men? These are warning signs of someone who is not interested in growth, but is content living in a bubble of false confidence. The lesson here applies to everyone. We all need honest feedback and challenges to grow. Avoiding them is a trap that leads to stagnation, repeated mistakes, and poor judgment. By recognizing this behavior in others and in ourselves, we can make conscious choices to seek real growth, embrace challenges, and welcome constructive criticism. In conclusion, a foolish person often surrounds themselves with yes men, avoids challenges, and rejects opportunities to improve. This behavior creates a life full of repeated mistakes, shallow relationships, and missed opportunities. In contrast, wise individuals embrace challenges, seek honest feedback, and continuously push themselves to grow. Recognizing this sign helps you protect your own growth while encouraging others to step out of their comfort zones and face life with courage and awareness. My friends, recognizing these 6 signs of a foolish person, refusing to listen, acting without thinking, blaming others, speaking without thinking, refusing to learn, and surrounding themselves with yes men can save you from unnecessary stress and mistakes. Life is too short to be drained by negativity and foolish behavior. Focus on growth, self-awareness, and wise choices, and you'll find yourself moving forward with clarity and confidence. Stay aware, stay wise, and keep growing every day. For more life-changing lessons and motivational insights, don't forget to follow Mind-Blowing Motive, your guide to living smarter, stronger, and happier.